Welcome to the Cyber Tech Podcast, inside the minds of everyday IT and cyber pros. Your host, Mike Fierros, will dive deep into the world of IT and cybersecurity, bringing you the stories and insights of professionals who are making waves in the field. From how they got started, to their most exciting projects, and their advice for aspiring tech enthusiasts, we cover it all. So, whether you're an industry veteran or just getting started, join us as we explore the fascinating minds behind the technology that shapes our world. Let's get started.
What's up, guys? How's it going? Mike again, Cyber Tech Podcast, inside the minds of everyday IT and cyber pros. Just want to give a quick shout out to Jason Blanchard from Black Hills InfoSec and Record Comics. He's the co-founder of Record Comics. If you guys haven't checked it out yet or even purchased them, go ahead and check them out on LinkedIn or even going to search on there. Check out their comic book called The Future Is. Their view of storytelling is really unique. And if you're into kind of like a cyber slash fantasy slash futuristic type comics stories, definitely check them out. Check out the Aspire Byte YouTube channel. Subscribe to it. If you're listening to the Aspire Byte YouTube channel, thank you for that. If you're listening to the Cybertech Podcast on Spotify, thank you for that as well. Give us some stars, give us the likes, share this, who you think they'll be beneficial to. In this episode number 18 of the Cybertech Podcast, I have another awesome person to bring on here. This is a former colleague of mine. This gentleman right here is no other than Luke Macias. He is a service desk manager for Stellantis Financial Services. How's it going, Luke?
Hello. I'm doing good, Mike. How are you?
Good. How about you, man?
Good. Busy, grinding, working out. Same old.
Thanks for coming on the podcast, Luke, because you have an interesting story.
No, thank you for having me. I think it's going to be a fun time to share the story, and I think my story overall as well will kind of help shine some light on, some mistakes that I made along the way, some different doors that opened, and kind of helping people get an idea of, how to get into the IT industry, what direction is right for them, and kind of how to stay sane in all of it too. Because by no means is IT an easy industry to keep up with, to stay relevant in. So yeah, I'm very excited to share my part of it.
Awesome. And Luke, for those that don't know you, kind of introduce yourself, your background, and how you got started in IT.
My name is Luke. I am 26 years old. I live in Houston, Texas, born and raised here. Lived here all my life besides 3 years in Fort Worth, Texas. But besides that, I've never lived outside of the state. How I started in IT, it was a very interesting time. So at the time I guess as a child, as a very young kid, I had a lot of technology things growing up. I had Game Boys, DSs, iPods. My dad had like a Walkman, different things. And being the clumsy child that I am, obviously, things broke. I broke my own things. I used to remember wondering, can I fix these myself? Are these fixable? How do I fix them, etc.? And at the time, the first device, it's actually really weird because I had an iPod, and I remember sitting in my room specifically, and I was looking, and I had a small crack on my phone or my iPod Touch, and it was like the second or third iPod Touch that had ever come out. And I remember just looking at it, holding it over the ground and letting go and letting it fall face first onto the floor. Shattered the LCD screen, completely busted, half the screen like looking like an old retro TV, just like blasting different colors and lines and whatnot. There's obviously physical damage to the LCD. And so I told myself, okay, well, someone's got to fix this. So immediately I jump on eBay, find a part. I'm pretty sure the part was some janky screen from China or something. It costs like $20 to get, it's suspiciously cheap, but I ordered it, wait a couple days, and it comes with the cheapy little toothpicks and the picks to pry the screen off, and these super janky screwdrivers to pull the screws out for the bottom. And so I pull up a YouTube video. I get a hair dryer because I didn't have a heat gun at the time, and so I start getting my mom's pink hair dryer and heating up the screen and cutting up at the adhesive. And about 45 minutes later, I did my first ever repair. And it was really interesting, seeing the internals and seeing everything plugged in and whatnot. It was actually a fairly easy repair for the most part. You look at the phones today, anybody that's listening or watching, if you go on YouTube and just try to look up your current device, and how you fix a cracked screen or just really anything, or even like an Android where the glass on the back, you used to have to heat that up and work from the back of the phone to the front. I mean, we've come such a long way with the way that these manufacturers now make their phones. So they compact so many things into a
True.
tiny little device that lives in our pocket. I mean, it's a mini computer. And so back in the day, it was way easier to fix these devices. So that was the very first time that I had ever actually done a repair, and thought to myself, as I think I was like 13 or 14 years old, I was like, man, this is really fascinating, and I'd be super interested in pursuing a career in this, or seeing if there's a way to do this for money. And that's when I was like doing this for friends and family and people that had phones that were broken and stuff. I do it, and I was able to pocket a little bit of money on. I come across this job post, and it says looking for a technician, a cell phone repair technician. And so I read the job posting, and it talks about the company. So the company was named Wiz Mobile. So Wiz Mobile had posted this on Craigslist, and I was reading over it. And the one thing that stood out to me is it had said, we don't expect you to know everything. We honestly are just looking for somebody that wants to learn the ropes and is excited to, work on these devices. I immediately was like, oh my goodness, this is my way to start doing this for like actual money, and do it with, a clientele, and, start to dabble in different devices that I myself haven't worked on. I ended up sending in a application on Craigslist. I think I sent like an email, and the immediate next day they said, hey, can you come in for an interview? I go in the next day. I think his name was Dario. So I meet with this gentleman. He was pretty much the manager, dope Hispanic dude, super, super friendly. I met with him, and we were kind of talking back and forth. And I think most of the interview just ended up being him and I talking about like gaming at the time, because I had just built my first gaming computer, which at the time I didn't know was absolutely not a gaming computer. I had gotten this like giant Dell computer that I don't know if it was a server or like a workstation or what it was, but what I specifically remember is that it had 2 CPUs. And I didn't know that much about computers yet. I just knew about, phones and things, and taking them apart and doing the repairs. And so we started talking about that during the job interview. And then lo and behold, the next day I get a phone call stating, hey, we want to bring you in. I left my 2 weeks notice at Buffalo Wild Wings and start my first ever technology IT job, as a cell phone repair technician for Wiz Mobile. So Wiz Mobile, they had 3 locations. They had 2 stores, and then a kiosk in a mall in Houston. And so I was cycling between the 2 stores as well as the kiosk, kind of going back and forth. And immediately I was starting to learn a bunch of things and do different things. I start doing repairs that I had never done before. I start working on iPads. I start working on actual laptops, because they were doing like computer repairs. They were offering different computer services as well, malware removal, just performance upgrades, storage, memory, etc. And so I start to develop different skills and learn to do different things here, left and right. I'm starting to learn about different things. And one of the neatest things that I think I had picked up there was learning a bit of micro soldering. So micro soldering was just an absolute, you had to have such a steady hand and so much patience. That was my first ever IT job going into the IT industry, just starting off as a cell phone repair technician. It was a pretty interesting time.
Yeah, when it comes to those mobile repairs, it could be stressful, especially back then with even now probably worse with the small screws, and then especially Apple likes to use adhesive tapes, and those cables that you got to make sure you had to take them off correctly and stuff like that. But that's awesome that you worked at Buffalo Wild Wings, and which you learned customer service, right? Like your soft skills, how to talk to people. When you got into Wiz Mobile, you had that curiosity still of like, hey, let me see if I can work on stuff, and just learning the grind, learning how to talk to people as they come up to your store, right?
Yeah, I couldn't agree anymore. And it was very funny, because I think a lot of the stresses that I ever had came from that job.
Yeah.
Just because it's already an industry that
Yeah.
we didn't make much of a profit margin. The parts
True.
itself were expensive, which in most cases, even if we were to charge just the part and absolutely no labor, it's very hard to justify or convince somebody to do that repair. Especially because iPhones nowadays, the parts are just so expensive that once a phone breaks, in most cases, you're just better off buying a new phone. It was a very interesting time, and there were many other instances where there was just so much high stress dealing with these people's devices, their phones, and there were times when we had phones or devices that didn't come back on. We would short
Mhm.
something on inside of the phone. We always let people know or had them sign that waiver, and we had insurance for these cases. But
Oh
you
yeah.
think of doing 7 or 8 repairs in a day with $30-$40 of profit at a time, and then out of those 7 or 8 devices, you have one expensive Samsung that you short circuit and the phone just dies. You can't just tell the client, "Hey, here's your phone. Good luck." Your entire day worth
True.
of profit goes down the drain. So
True.
it's funny because so this is where the story kind of takes a turn. So I was working for Wiz Mobile at the
Nice.
time, and we weren't allowed to. I won't get into the specifics of what the repair was, but there was a certain kind of repair that I started to do that we were not allowed to do. The owner didn't want
Mm.
us to do it, but it had a good profit margin. And at the time, I was 16 years old. I was young, dumb,
Nice.
and naive. And so I told myself, well, if they don't want to do it, I'm going to do it, and I'm going to pocket the money. I have no clue why I thought this was a good idea at the time. Again, I was young, dumb, and naive. For anybody listening, never do anything like this. I don't condone this kind of behavior. So I start doing the repairs and I start pocketing the money. And,
Mm.
it didn't take long for them to catch on. They have cameras. They know that I'm there. They were starting to get skeptical about, hey, he's not doing that many repairs. What's happening?
Mm.
So I start doing this kind of repair and I'm pocketing the money. And so surely enough, one day I go into the office and I'm getting set up for my day. And then all of a sudden a police officer walks in.
Mm.
And then right behind the police officer is the owner of the company. And I've only ever seen him one other time. It was when he invited the entire company out for crawfish
Oh,
after
nice.
like a good year. I think it was like near Christmas or something. It was just kind of like a good little end of year, hey, thanks
Mm.
for all your hard work kind of thing. And so at the time, my dad had just passed away about 2 months prior. Things were not really that good, which I'm not going to at all say that, that led me to make that decision. I think at the end of the day, everybody takes accountability. Everybody has hard circumstances that they go through. But
Mm.
at the end of the day, you make the decision that you make and whatnot. So I'm not at all going to attribute to this. I'm just going to attribute it to me being young, dumb, and naive. And so he walks in with the officer and he says, "All right, Luke, you're going to call your mom right now and we're going to have a talk." So I'm like, okay. Immediately I knew that, like the second he
Mm.
came in, said that and the officer was there, I knew what it was about. So he calls my mom and he pretty much said, at the time he said, you have two options. You can call your mom right now, or this police officer is going to take you to jail. And so
Mm.
obviously being 16, 17 or whatever, however old I was at the time, I obviously didn't want to go to jail. So I call my mom. She already had enough stress from my dad passing away. And this was like the last thing that she needed on her plate.
Mm.
Um, Long story short, they did an investigation. They deemed that I had stolen about $20,000 worth of money, which was not even
Mm.
remotely true. But this is another lesson for anybody that's ever listening: is that anytime you make a bad decision or something, there's going to be negative repercussions and consequences.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, in this case, because I made a bad decision, it's the boy who cried wolf situation. That
Mm.
this person has been stealing. What if you already know that this person's been stealing from you? Why would you trust them in coming clean about how much they've been stealing? But for anybody listening,
Mm.
just so you know, it was not that much. It was maybe at most like $1,000 to $2,000. It was not that much of a profitable repair that I
Mm.
was doing, because the type of repair I was doing was a super cheap part and micro soldering, and it's just a bunch of labor. So I just charge a decent amount of labor. And
Mm.
so my mom ended up having to wipe her entire savings account just so that I didn't go to jail.
Mm.
It was an absolute awful time at the time, and it's one of those things I live with, and it's my mom and I still talk about it to this day. We can gratefully laugh about it, and I've been able to return the favor and the pay and stuff, and so obviously I got fired immediately when they found out about that. I got fired in a complete heartbeat. And so I ended up going to, in the meantime, while I was trying to figure things out, I decided to go work at, I think I worked at Panera. So I went to go work at Panera Bread for a little bit as I was applying for a couple of different jobs. The nice thing about this is that I had the owner of the company, his name was Bruce. Bruce had said, okay, since you've paid this debt, here's a contract stating that now, since the debt has been paid in full, I legally will never come after you. I don't have a right to pursue legal action or anything.
Mm.
Consider the debt cleared. And he submitted it to Harris County, the county that I live in and whatnot. And so that ended up going that way. Took me about a good 2 years to pay my mom back, but it is what it is. And so I was working at Panera at the time, I think for like a week or two. I thought, let me let me do something crazy. And I was like, let me send an application
Mm.
into the Apple store. Again, being the kid that I am, I had friends, and we would always get together and watch the conferences, the Apple conferences, the keynotes and
Nice.
everything. And I was just such a huge Steve Jobs fan, and just everything
Mm.
Steve Jobs and Apple. And so I ended up submitting an application, and about a week later, I ended up getting a job somewhere else. I think I ended up quitting Panera. It just ended up being a terrible time, and it just wasn't worth the money. And so right before that, right before quitting Panera, I had gotten an email from Apple
Mm.
saying, "Hey, we'd like to bring you in for an interview." I
Nice.
start freaking out of excitement and just everything. Again, 16, 17-year-old me. I don't know. I think I was 18 at the time, finally 18, because yeah, you had to be 18 to work at Apple. And I'm just over the moon excited with, oh my goodness, the company that, the devices that I always looked forward to, saved up
Mm.
the money to buy and, break and fix. And just like, I was always on, I think it's iFixit, the website,
Oh
iFixit
yeah.
forums, and seeing their tear apart guides, like the moment that a phone
Yeah.
comes out, and just seeing everything Apple. And so to finally get this email and see, hey, we want to bring you in for an interview, I'm like, oh my goodness. And so I remember sharing it with my mom, and my world came crashing down when she said, "Don't get your hopes up. They're probably going to interview you, and that's the last you'll hear from them." Something along those lines. And so I'm
Mm.
like, okay, well, way to rain on my parade, but okay. So I start researching like crazy interviews, success stories of like getting an Apple retail and stuff.
Mm.
And immediately as I start researching it, I start to pick up on, okay, they don't care about technology in the sense of your experience or anything.
Mm.
For anybody that knows Steve Jobs and the kind of person that he was not a normal person. Not as an
Yeah.
insult, but he was just an
Yeah.
absolute genius and so different.
Mhm.
And I could pick that up from everybody's, success stories and the people that failed the interviews and stuff. So I start researching like crazy, and I've probably dumped about 20 hours of just YouTube videos, Glassdoor, LinkedIn, everything, just researching how to get into Apple. And so the day comes, and I finally go to the Apple store for the interview. And so I think it's about 10 of us in a big circle. We
Mm.
go outside, or it's in the mall. It's in one of the shopping malls here in Houston. So we go out to like the food court area, and we have like a big like round table. And so the interview process was pretty cool. So they just had everybody like kind of introduce themselves and their background and things of that nature. And so they ended up asking a couple of very normal questions, your background, et cetera. What do we think? And so I ended up going to this the second interview. I got invited to the second interview, and the specific question that I remember got me the job is they asked me, what do you think that Apple is doing right that other companies aren't doing right? And so I specifically had remembered somebody talking about in the Glassdoor pages that I was researching that
Mm.
they want to know that you are customer service oriented. And so the exact answer that I had given was that I found it so interesting that Apple does not pay commission because it allows for them to foster a work environment that's healthy, non competitive, where we can actually give a good customer journey experience
Mm.
to these clients. Um, and I remember specifically that answer was, I know that it was the answer that got me the job because everybody else gave like a, oh, this, that, or, yada, yada. But my answer, the way that the gentleman that gave me the interview, the way he was looking at me, he was pretty starstruck about it. So that's how I
Mm.
got my job at Apple. I ended up
Nice.
working for them for about 2 years as just a technician. I worked all the way up to Genius, which is the techs that work doing the Mac repairs and actual physical hardware repairs and working on the Macs and doing the walk-up interactions.
Nice.
And then immediately after that, I segued into a company where I was a software tester. They ended up building a piece of software for veterans, and it was a banking firm. So they were going to be able to help them. And so I helped them with their software where new clients were going to be able to submit their forms. So it asked them their age, name, date of birth, et cetera, so on and
Mm.
so forth. We had different compliances that we had to meet. I worked there for a little bit, and then the next role was for United Healthcare as a service desk technician.
Nice.
And so you interviewed Ben. Now that I
Yep.
remembered, so that's
Yeah.
how I actually met Ben and Chris, both two of our coworkers, and
Yeah.
I worked there for about almost 2 years. Started as a contractor. This is during COVID, and same thing. Whenever I interviewed with them, they had asked me, we want somebody that's really customer service oriented and that's willing to learn service desk. So that was my first actual job that got me into the IT industry. And so I picked up a lot of
Mm.
Active Directory skills, Outlook,
Yeah.
Exchange, admin, everything that enterprise-wise, imaging, computers, everything.
Mm.
Very call center like, but I loved it. The customer service was great. The aspect of it was great. And then from there, I ended up going to GlobalMac IT, which is where you and I
Yep.
worked together. I worked as a
That's right.
service desk technician, and then went on to the project side of things, did a little bit of system administrative work, dabbled on all the Mac things. And then now I have found myself working for Stellantis Financial Services as a service desk manager. It's been an
Nice.
absolute great time. We have so many projects in the works, and yeah, that's kind of been the career growth and path that I've learned. And all of this to say without absolutely any experience besides being a kid that loved breaking his phones and fixing them. It just comes to show you that if you're willing to put in the time, the effort, the research, grind it out, there are avenues into IT. And I'm kind of trying to follow this path of let's see how far I can make it in the IT workspace without having to go to school and get a degree. Certifications speak volumes. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's kind of a little bit of the path that I've gone down.
No, that's an interesting path, Luke. Like I'm with you. Like when I was younger, I mean, this is before, before I even DJ'd, I would, we all make, we like you mentioned, we all do dumb stuff when we're young. So, when I was young, for example, I hung out with the wrong people and got in trouble and was on probation and all that good stuff as a juvenile. But like, we make mistakes in the past, but like you mentioned, like it's important that you go through it, you learn it. We're not perfect at whatsoever. We make, like you mentioned, we make decisions even at a young age. I remember I did a bunch of times, and we have people around us, like your mom, maybe a coworker, a good friend, cousin, uncle, that comes around us and kind of corrects us. And so when that happens to you, I think that's really, really important because you mentioned about getting to Apple, you start working at Apple, that course correction that happened, that learning experience that happened, it's really, really important, especially if you're going to work in, whether you work for a big corporation like Apple, a smaller corporation, small, big, medium business size, doesn't matter what industry or what organization you work for when you're in the IT space, but to learn your mistakes and to being inspired, especially with Steve Jobs. So yeah, you're right. Steve Jobs was a different type of person. And so, he looked at people and he looked at people's not just skill sets, but their people skills. He had a genius business mind as well. But you researching that stuff without any experience, it for those looking at that, trying to maybe working for Apple one day, or maybe considering an organization that they have an eye on, or even starting your own business and stuff. Research, just like Luke did. You research the heck out of Apple, Luke, and you figure out, hey, let me try to steer my way in there, because when that knowledge you've gained to get into Apple, it helped. But you going through the grind of doing mobile devices very young, even the industry you're in, as a software tester, GlobalMac, which is MSP, we work remotely full time. I work with you there now as a service desk manager. You've been in different spaces as far as like in the IT world. And so, that kind of flexibility that you have and the insight, not just on Windows PCs and not just mobile devices, but on Mac OS stuff. You touch Active Directory on the Windows side, and MDM stuff on the Apple side. So that's really important. That gives you very versatile strengths, if you will, the experiences you put in together and whatnot. Luke, for those that are looking to go from one industry, let's say, like, for example, if we have someone that works for, Buffalo Wild Wings, like you did, Luke, and wants to pivot into IT, what kind of advice would you give as far as like how to start off?
What helped me in most of the cases in every job that I got, which it could be possible that I just got very lucky, or it could be that,
Mhm.
there are employers that specifically want this. In my case, it was the deep passion for customer service and also learning and
Mhm.
developing skills. So I think for
Oh
anybody
yeah.
that's out there that wants to do that, do something as simple as, get a go get a broken computer, fix it, learn how a computer works. We have
Mhm.
so many pieces of software. Amazon, even, for example, for anybody that wants to ever become, for example, a cloud engineer, Amazon provides free environments for people that
Mhm.
want to learn, because there is a need for that. So try to tap into that, curious bit of yourself, figure out what you like, want to do, which is what I did with breaking phones and fixing them. We have so many resources out there. I mean, technology is crazy. We have
Yeah.
AI. You can
Yeah.
go in and ask AI, like, hey, I want to learn this. What's the best path? How can I? There have been times where
Mhm.
I ask questionnaires to AI and just ask it, what certifications should I go for? What skill will keep me relevant? So I think
Mhm.
really it's just go find any free resources that are out there. Like even with Mac OS things, there's free MDM tools out there that'll give you 14-day free trials, or even like I
Mhm.
know Mosel's one of them that you can use it for free up to X amount of devices. So that's even like for anybody that wants to learn how to manage iPhones, iPads, devices. I'm sure there's things like that for the Windows side too. Go and explore these things. If you like it, it's not the end of the world. And so I think that
Mhm.
it's very fortunate that we live in a day and age that we have these resources at our hands. And I think one of the biggest pieces that helped me too is Udemy. For those of you guys that haven't heard
Oh
of
yeah.
Udemy is an online platform that pretty much is just an absolute library of video resources. Because I hate reading. I
Yeah.
love videos, and I can listen to like ebooks, podcasts, etc. Go use these resources and platforms and just try to find something that you think is of interest. And if it works out, great. If it doesn't, go on to the next subject and try to find that. But yeah, just find what area you're passionate about, and dabble into that and see if that is truly a passion and how you can make that an actual career out of it.
And shout out to Ben Trevino on episode number 6. If you guys haven't listened to that episode, definitely listen to that one. Ben is an awesome colleague and friend, and a friend of ours that is really good at what he does in IT, especially on the service desk and whatnot. You're right, Luke. Like, a lot of people have that misconception. Like, if I need to get to IT, I'd have to be a genius. No, I was not a genius when I came into IT and whatnot, and I'm still not. So just learning that grind, learning from other people's experiences, that knowledge that we give. You're right, Luke. Like, there's all kinds of areas we could go in. Project management, like we were doing stuff together. Service desk, email administration, all kinds of stuff out there, and just to narrow down. But starting at the service desk, I as well recommend that help desk position, wherever they, desktop support. You will touch all kinds of technologies, networking, servers, Mac OS, Windows, Linux, depending on where you're working at, RMM, MDM. You will touch all kinds of technologies, and that's super important because once you do narrow down your career and you really like, hey, I'd like to be a network administrator, or hey, maybe I want to get to information technology, maybe I want to do GRC things, or maybe I want to get more into cybersecurity space, doing red teaming, blue teaming. Once you narrow down that, or maybe project management, once you narrow down that, really, I think my strengths are right here, and I really enjoy what I'm doing. And you look back, Luke, like you mentioned, you're like, you'll be happy that you went through that because now you can help other people get into the space, or help out those teams still. That's golden right there, Luke, for sure. What does it mean to be a great IT professional?
I think the two that I would say are really important. The first one is just be a nice person.
Mhm.
Again, I think at the end of the day, it's the work that we do is hard. Doesn't matter
Yeah.
where you're working. Doesn't matter if you're a service desk tech, a
Mhm.
network engineer, a cloud engineer, cybersecurity. Um, Being a nice person doesn't it goes such a
True.
long way. It
Uh-huh.
doesn't hurt. It doesn't cost you anything to be a nice person, especially just we all used to be at the
Mm.
service desk. We all used to be a brand new person. This goes with just anything in life. Everyone starts somewhere.
True.
So whether you're talking to
Mhm.
your peers, an intern, a client, your director, it doesn't matter who. It doesn't hurt. It doesn't hurt you anything to be nice. Remember where you started.
True.
It takes a little bit of humility to kind of remember that
Mhm.
stuff. But I think the second thing is you have to be willing to accept right off of the bat that you are in an industry in a space that is always evolving.
Yeah.
Things are never going to stay the same. There's always going to be changes, new skills that you need to pick up on, new vulnerabilities, threats to your
Mm.
environment, to your role potentially, to your organization. So at the end of the day, if anybody listening is considering going into IT, have that in the back of your mind because one of the
Mhm.
struggles I've always thought about when I'm looking for my next career path or next role is what am I going to do to continue to develop my skills and be look appealing to an
Mm.
employer, to a recruiter, to a hiring manager. Because especially in today's day and age with AI and just you're a small fish in a giant ocean.
Yeah.
The two things that have helped me out is I've dabbled in a little bit of everything, which
Mm.
I try to wear multiple hats, which has helped me. But as well, just
Mhm.
like I mentioned before, I think just having the customer service passion and reflecting and making it very well known in my interviews as well that I love developing skills and I usually do tell most of my employers like if I work the same role for longer than a year I tend to get bored and I tell them that up front because it's kind of a double-edged sword. It helps them know that okay, he's willing to learn, pick up new skills, etc. So yes, we want to invest in him, but maybe some to
Mm.
another employer they say no, we don't want somebody like that. But I think the biggest takeaway is that to be an actual IT professional, you have to continue to always develop your
Yeah.
skills and stay relevant. Because especially now that I'm in a management role,
Mhm.
it's very we are unfortunately some of our upper management team has a bit of a old school mindset of hey, if they're not willing to do it, then we'll just get somebody else to that will do it for cheaper or whatever
Mm.
the case is. And it is unfortunately true because at the end of the day, if you can't do the job, somebody else can and will. So think about that as you continue down your IT journey is what's the next step? What's the next thing that's going to keep me relevant or that's going to get me to that higher role, that higher pay, the better kind of work or get me out of service desk. Whatever path you're trying to go down, just continue to develop yourself as an IT technician, because that's what's going to actually open up all those doors for you.
Considering to get into IT, like you mentioned, you have to be aware of that, and you have to, get your mindset already. If you're not in IT field yet, to realize that this space you will have to learn the rest of your career, from no matter what age. If you get into IT into 16, or if you're 66 years old, we have to constantly learn because today's latest operating system, whether it's Mac OS, Windows, your flavor of Linux, the skill sets that we're learning that may not be around, within the next 5 years. And so we have to take those into consideration. And especially your background, Luke, you're very versatile, and that's going to help later on as far as when someone gets into like for example, manager role. That's going to help you later on because you're able to recognize certain things, and it'll come to you as you've done the grind in the past and learning those tough experiences and whatnot. So that's definitely gonna help. If you were given one day to go to your favorite theme park, whether it be Disney, Universal, Six Flags, whatever it may be, and you had a chance to pick one person, celebrity, politician, someone that inspired you, who would you pick, and what ride would you want to go on with them first?
I think if I had to go to a park, the park would be probably Disney, just because that's the only theme park that I've gone to. I've only gone twice, actually. Now that I think about it, I've only gone twice, but I've enjoyed it very much the times that I've gone. As I think of the celebrity, the ride that I would do, so the specific park that I would go to is Disney World. I'd go to Epcot. I think the ride, is it called? Oh, it's Spaceship Earth, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, Spaceship Earth.
Oh, okay.
The Spaceship Earth is that one. Yeah, the one that you just sit in this little thing and you go in a circle and it talks about time and history, and it goes to the mummies. I specifically picked that ride because that would be the ride that I could actually have a conversation with somebody for a quick amount of time. I think honestly, I would. Man, if Steve Jobs was alive, I think I'd want to pick his brain. And if not Steve Jobs, then I think any of the owners or the creators of any of these MDM softwares that we work with. I mean, even now, it's just I still have a deep passion for everything Apple. Even currently in our role, I'm helping out my greatest. Funny enough, to Adigy, because we were using Jamf, and Jamf, it's too big of a beast. We don't need it to do what we need it to do, or well, it does do it, but it's just overkill. And so I convinced upper management to sign a contract with Adigy. We actually are just finishing that up, and then I'm gonna help migrate us over. But I think I'd want to talk to them.
Yeah, and as soon as you're done with Steve Jobs, I'd probably ask him, "Hey, Steve, can I go and go again with you?"
Yeah, probably visit the Apple Park or something.
There we go. Yeah, there we go.
The Apple Park.
Yeah, there we go. We love that. No, that's awesome, Luke. Yeah, I mean, yeah, shout out to Adigy. Yeah, when it comes to Apple MDM management stuff, they're really, really great guys over there. Appreciate you coming on the podcast, man. I think your experiences is really unique, and there are relatable things. Even with me, as far as when I was younger, I got into trouble too. Doing dumb stuff too. So, it's just a great example that people that surround you can help you out and make a course correction. I really appreciate your story. For those, Luke, that maybe want to contact you, maybe even get like some career IT advice, whether they're trying to get into IT or maybe they're in IT now, and you mentioned about MDM and they may be interested in it. Where can they contact you at?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. Luke Macias. Username is Luke Macias, Macias 123. I'm also on Instagram as Modi, MODI_DJS. Modi DJs. Those are usually the two platforms that I'm fairly active on.
As always, I'll make sure that podcast notes for those links, Luke, are on there. That way, if anybody wants to contact you, they can just hit that, whether on the YouTube channel or here on Spotify, wherever you listen to, you can just hit it. That way, you can go and contact you anytime they need to. No, I appreciate your time, Luke, man. Glad it's been a while since we talked, and I'm glad you're able to share your story, like I said, and appreciate it, man.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Special shout out to Jared. Jared was also kind of the guy, our coworker that also helped me develop into the person that I am. And if it wasn't for him, I don't think that I would be have made it as far as I did. So that's kind of the last piece that I'll leave off. Yeah, for anybody listening, find that mentor, find that person that's willing to help you develop your skills, and just pick their brains. Surround yourself by the people that you want to be like, and like with anything, you spend enough time with them and you will become a byproduct of what you surround yourself with.
That's so true. That's so true. And with that note, episode number 18 in the books with Luke Macias, Service Desk Manager at Stellantis Financial Services. Thanks again, Luke, and we'll see you guys